Well, this is what we've got. We're gonna butcher this white-tailed deer. I'm not gonna show a step-by-step and all the grody stuff. It just finds what we do all the time. But just part of my Hickbilly life. Stay tuned.
I don't like deer meat. Ew, deer meat's nasty. Huh. I've heard that more than once. I've heard that recently. Welcome to my Hickbilly life. This is not going to be a video about how to field dress a deer, how to prepare a deer. As much through photo evidence, I'm just going to talk about it real quick because I see a lot of things. I hear things in my restaurant here about how people handle their deer, and then that thing of, I don't like deer meat, white-tailed deer, whatever. Really. There's so many things I could cover right here. Basically, it's this. If you like a McDonald's hamburger and you say you don't like deer meat, you've had some awfully bad prepared deer meat, because that emu stuff they serve is not as good as my deer. Bottom line. If you eat beef, pork, chicken, etc., and you don't say you don't like deer meat, you're a hypocrite. Most likely, you probably haven't gave it a fair shot. But then again, a big part of what I want to talk about here is how it's handled, prepared. If you take a beef, Lord help you, it's a grass-fed beef because we have to be all organic, and you don't handle that beef properly, it's not very good. We had some in the restaurant here a while back come in, some ground beef. It was horrible. It hadn't been hung long enough, if at all. It hadn't been aged, and that is a huge part to any meat. Breaking down those enzymes and proteins to where it's more edible, palatable, palatable. Oops. Hickbilly shouldn't be allowed to do videos like this probably. And no notes. I need my notes. Here's the deal. From the get-go, if that deer is not handled, taken care of, even killed, yeah, I know harvest is correct, but if it's not killed perfectly, you have issues. Same thing as in a professional setup in a meat locker. If an animal's not taken out cleanly and efficiently, it's not as good a meat. You take a deer that's been hit by a car, runs around wounded, maybe shot and wounded, unfortunately it happens. That deer is not going to be as good a meat no matter what you do, because it has adrenaline, it has all that stuff kicks in, and that meat is, I hate to use the word poison, but pretty much I think it's poison. Then you get the guy who he kills a white-tailed deer, and that's my experience with whitetail. I've never hunted mule deer and elk. I guarantee it's all pretty much the same. I know it is. This guy, say, shoots a big old rank, nasty buck. It's rutting, but he got his big antlers. Somehow gets it loaded in his truck without field dress in it. That means getting the guts out of it. And then shows it off around town all day in 70-degree sun, and he wonders why that deer tastes like poop, because pretty much that's what it was. He had 150 pounds of poop. Okay? The most important part to any meat you're going to eat is to get the animal efficiently dispatched, and then as quick as possible get his innards on his outwards so he cools down. Get that meat to start cooling. I do it that way. As soon as I can feel safe about going up to an animal, I am going to get its innards out, and I'm going to clean it out a little bit. I don't put water on it. I think water's a bad idea unless it's perfectly fresh tap water. I don't put water on my animals ever. I've seen guys put pond water and creek water in one. Oh my gosh. The bacterial chain of destruction, you start doing that, it's just asking for problems. So first thing, get that deer gutted. What happens after that is where most people fail. I process my own meat. A lot of people can't, don't, won't, whatever. You take that deer to a locker that processes deer. If they're any good, they're going to be busy. Oh man, and if your somebody owns a processing plant, you know I'm right. You know exactly what I'm talking about here, so you can't say nothing. I've seen those deer piled up in the sun and hope that your deer's on the bottom where the sun's not on it, because the thing that happens, especially around here in central Missouri, we get some fairly warm weather. You get those green flies start buzzing them deer, and guess what happens when they land on that deer? They make babies. I want maggots in my deer meat. It can happen at any butcher plant on the planet. You have to get that deer in a spot out of the sun, cool, and a lot of processing plants don't do a very good job at that. Next, how long will they hang a deer for you? I tell you what, y'all, the biggest difference between the way they do it and the way I do it is I don't have a controlled environment. I have to make it as controlled as possible. If I hang a deer in a tree, which is the old, and I still do it, it's the old-fashioned way to do it. You hang that deer from a tree so that it can air out and cool down, and then you have 15-degree nights and 40-degree days with sun on it. That's a freeze-thaw thing, guaranteed gonna spoil meat. So you obviously can't hang one very long in that situation. I also don't want those bugs on my deer, so if there's any chance at all it's gonna be in the mid-50s and up, I wrap it in cheesecloth. And if it's gonna rain, I can take one of those big old 55-gallon drum hefty bags and put over it. I don't want rain in my deer. Rain's clean water, but I think water sours the meat. That's kind of my opinion. Since I'm of an age, I'm opinionated a lot of things. I can just tell you that we ate deer last night, and I had some more for lunch today from the first deer that I've harvested in over 8 years, and it's frickin' delicious. It's good. Oh, it doesn't taste like beef. I can make my deer taste just like beef. No, you can't. Not unless you're eating grass-fed bulls. I don't know. You cannot. It's not deer. It's not pork. It's not chicken. It's not orangutan. It ain't Walmart, McDonald's, emu meat special. It's not. It's white-tailed deer or whatever. Not opinionated at all. I'm not. So if you're going to hang a deer up, it needs to be in the shade. Keep the sun off it as much as possible. You need to wrap it in cheesecloth. Put a hefty bag over it if it's going to rain. But you don't want that big black hefty bag on there with the sun shining on it. Now you're cooking that deer while it's hanging. Anyway, the most time I've ever hung a deer was about 7 days, where I felt comfortable. You don't want the deer to spoil, obviously, but you want it to break down to its fullest potential. This deer that we ate last night, I cut it up a couple days ago, 11 days. 11 days since I harvested that white-tailed deer before I cut it up. And it was almost perfect. The trick with that deer was, it's a neat trick that I do. It's a trick. Is I put it in my shop on that concrete floor. Concrete floor does a couple things. First off, it helps pull heat out of an animal. At least Missouri in November, December, it helps pull that heat out of that animal. But it also keeps the animal from freezing because it holds enough heat. It keeps it more stable ambient temperature, okay? I also, almost instantly, it was 50 degrees the day I killed the deer, it's 50s a lot of days, is I just keep a bag of ice I put in the deer's body cavity. Same thing hanging. I'll keep a bag of ice, 2 bags of ice in a big deer, keep rotating them. That water didn't hurt anything, it's gonna leak out, I get that. You can't be perfect. Get that thing cold. Get it to where when you touch the lower legs and the hooves, it's cold to the touch. That deer's not going to spoil and the bugs will leave alone. So aging meat that was not stressed, was handled carefully to start with, never got hot, never got bug infested, that's the key. There's not much about corn-fed deer against grass-fed because deer are not fatty like a beef is. They don't have fat running through their meat. It just doesn't happen. Matter of fact, the fat on a deer is another problem people have, because if you leave fat in your processed meat, you're not going to like it. Most wild animal fat is disgusting. Most fish, raccoon, deer, it's not edible. Not to me. Now maybe if it works for you, great. Minimal amount, yeah, but you cannot, I don't leave fat on my deer meat at all. So the meat itself is a pure red. There's nothing, no marbling. It just doesn't happen in deer. makes it a very lean meat, which of course is organic and good for you, huh? Go figure. So when we grind our beef up, we always keep suet back, keep fat back, and we grind it back in with our deer. We had to go to the store and buy some, the butcher buy some here the other day because we didn't have enough. I blend about 10 to 12% beef suet in with my ground on my whitetail. Which, speaking of ground meat, also whitetail deer do not have steaks. They're not big enough. I mean, a 300-pound northern buck may be big, but you don't want to cut steaks on whitetail deer and cut through that bone, because that bone and that marrow is poison. I've seen butcher shops do that. Cut that like they do a beef and cut that bone, and that's just spreading poison. It's just nasty. It's not what you want to do with a wild animal. We're really careful about that. So then you age this deer for a while. What happens with aging? All this stuff starts breaking down. The meat breaks down some, but all the silver skin that separates the muscle pieces and all that viscous coverings, and even all the way down to almost the sinew, starts to come apart. And when I take a deer down to field dress it, it almost pulls apart according to the serrations in the muscle, the little places, the separations where the muscle fits together, and I cut off the bone that way. I'm not worried about steaks because deer really don't have steaks. I could then cut steaks out of that meat if I wanted to, but why? It's not steak. It doesn't eat the same as a beef steak. Personally, it don't matter what you want to do. Personally, what we do, every bit of the meat on the deer gets ground up in the burger except the tenderloins, which are frickin' delicious. I don't care what you do. And the backstrap, which on a big deer can be really big, long, that big around. The one I did the other day was a younger deer. It was about that big around and about 2.5 feet long on both sides of the backbone. It is very tender meat. We cut that up in little steakettes and fry it in little discs about that big around. Well, same diameter. Well, I said that big around. And it's just freaking awesome. That's the only way, and we just fry it. There's all kinds of fancy things you can do. We fry it with flour, salt, and pepper, and it's just maybe a little garlic powder. It's out of this world, okay? And it's tender. Oh, the tenderloin. The tenderloin is one thing on a deer that I usually eat before I age it. We didn't this time. Hung that deer 11. Had the deer 11 days before I cut it up. I got another deer down now. Same thing. I'm waiting to grind my meat up till I got them both together and make it a little easier. But this one's not gonna make it 11 days. Got some really, really cold weather coming in. It's gonna change the way I do it. I'm monitoring this on a day-by-day basis on what I think that deer is gonna be like. You've got to age the meat. You've got to handle the meat properly from the time you kill it to the time you butcher it to the time you package it for freezing, okay? People say, I don't like whitetail deer meat. They've never had it done right. They've had a nasty old rancid buck that hung in the sun for a bunch of days getting maggots laid in it by flies. Oh, the other thing, no tip, butchers will be able to tell you this, the ones that are honest. If you take your deer into a processor, I've even heard an ad on the radio lately about a guy, guarantee you get your deer back. You take your deer into a processor, 145-pound whitetail buck, which I know is not a big buck for some places. Around here it's about average, 135 to 155 pounds. You're gonna get, we don't cut the meat all the way down to the frickin' hocks. I just don't do that. The muscle, sinew meat, I don't try to eat that either. So I'm wasteful that way. The dogs love it. The cats eat it. The chickens, oh my gosh, chickens will fight over that. You'll get, on a full-grown deer, 45 pounds of meat, maybe 50, I don't know, something like that. You take it in, you want 20 pounds of summer sausage and 15 pounds of breakfast sticks, blah, 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 blah. You're not getting just your deer back. You're getting other people's deer too. And that is a spoiler for me. I cannot hardly ever eat deer that somebody else has handled. I don't care. I got people I know. It's got a smell and a taste because it wasn't done the way I do it. How do you know how long is long enough to hang? If you have time to do this, you're not going to like this, but it's a fact. And the best meat processors in the world that have the most expensive steak, this is the way they do it. The animal's hanging up there, wherever on the floor. When it starts to get mold on the inside of the thighs, hit my thighs. That's when it's about right. It's just mold. It's not spoilage. It's getting ready to spoil. Them Japanese steaks are hundreds of dollars a pound. That's spoiled meat. They save it at a certain point, but it's basically, that's why it's so tender and delicious. You know, Europeans invented spices to cover up the taste of spoiled meat. That's why spices were invented to start with. Not to enhance the flavor, but to cover up spoiled. How's that for a factoid you may not know? Anyway, when a deer gets to that point, you need to cut it up then though. You don't want to wait, because it's getting ready to spoil, but it's not. You'll peel that off or scrape that off. It's just penicillin. It won't hurt anything. You got to get over the fact that this animal is cleaner and safer than anything you can buy in the store. When it's got sulfate on it, it's got steroids, drugs, it's got all kinds of crap, and then you tell me, I'm organic. Ain't nothing much more organic than a deer or a beaver or a squirrel. That's organic, and it's fine eating, y'all. It's not going to be a cooking show. I just wanted to share that with you. Thanks for watching. This is part of my Hickbilly life. We'll talk to you later. God bless.